we lose that ability to be creative. The system kills it little by little,
Yeah.
and it tells you that you are not creative, right? The children needed that fearless space of exploration, and craft was the answer.
For those of you who joined the session, thank you so much for joining. Let me do a quick introduction and then we'll let you know more about our special guest today. Um, we are, at Beyond 8, our focus is to enable young adults to pursue transformative pathways in liberal education, right? In simpler words, we want to enable them to lead purposeful lives and not just meaningful careers, right? So that's what who we are. And in this season of Out of the Box Conversation, we are talking to change makers, trailblazers who've actually questioned the status quo, and they've actually been change agents. And we have with us today a very special guest and a dear friend, Aparna Vinod. Aparna, thank you so much for making it today. Allow me to introduce you to the audience. Well, I'm sure all your followers know you. For the Beyond 8 followers who don't know you, let me do the introduction part. Aparna is a founder of Craft Caravan. Craft Caravan is a learning organization which produces resources based on craft and cultural learning to improve education, the experience of education in schools. She's also a faculty member for creative education at the Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. And she also co-founded the Youth Futures Alliance, an organization that trains young adults in futures thinking. Aparna, with such a tight job, I know you must be busy. So once again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Vimal. It's been a pleasure to have been invited and to do the planning and all that. Lovely. Thank you for having me over.
Lovely. Like we discussed, Aparna, the conversation today is on how do we encourage or nudge young adults to pursue careers that are based on passions and not just conventions. Right? We come from a generation where our choices for courses or our courses, whatever courses we took, right, was based on the career potential, like how many zeros are going to get added to your compensation, right? Why don't you run us through your varied or a very different journey that you had in your life?
Okay. So I really have had like a river that I think went fairly crazy at one point, but I look back today and I'm like, wow, how do I do this? But yeah, so I started off, I studied the humanities in college, and post that went on to study film and mass communication because that was essentially the only thing creative people did in those days. Okay. So if I said I wanted to be a potter, like which I said, I was like, no, I just told no. Like, you have to go and do something that's creative and gives you a job. So yeah, so I went on to do film, and after that, film and communication, and I held jobs in the development sector doing communication work. Then I've done a little bit of journalism. I've made films. I have worked in corporate communication. And my last job like that was in the communication space was a corporate job that I held post which I had my child. And that really was life changing, right? Because on one hand, I chose to stay home for a couple of years to be around the baby. And then I started to see how children looked at everything with a sense of wonder. There was a newness in the gaze, which we had sort of lost in time. And as a parent, I wanted to, and because I was available, it was essential that I gave her that space to experience that newness each time. And then I started to see how limited my options were, and I would carry my child and take her to museums, and but there was like really there was such limited options of what we could do. And then went back to things that I enjoyed doing. We were a no TV household, so I went back to doing crafting with her, and then I started to see how much I was enjoying the process and how much she was responding to that journey. So then people got together and said, "Hey, why aren't you doing something about this? Like why isn't this becoming a sort of endeavor? Because you seem to be good at this." And then the craft caravan began with little workshops. But what happened, Vimal, is because I started to realize that my strength was not just using the crafts, it was the ability to bring all the experiences I had had, be it in the humanities, be it in communication, tie it together in a sort of string and use craft as a method to kind of deliver that content.
Yeah.
It was that became the craft caravan's journey, right? Then I started to do a lot of workshops. I traveled all over India doing workshops and things like that. Done some work with schools and stuff. Uh, I would go to a school and then the conversation would be, hey, we love what you do, but how are you trained to do this? Because they would essentially expect that you're trained to be a teacher.
Yeah.
But I felt that as a teacher, I think what I needed was certain qualities which I already had. What I didn't have was the sense of like the strength that I had of putting curriculum or what you call a curriculum or a plan together to kind of think of that in a more designerly manner. So I went to design school when I was about 34, when my child was about 6.5 years old, went back and became a student and studied design. And that was really the dream, you know. Uh, I have this joke that I felt I was a creative person and I wanted to be a designer, so I married one, you know. So that's what happened, yeah. But eventually, I went to design school and I did a course in creative education, and ended up I also teach at Shishi School of Art and Design now, Manipal Art and Design, and I also do my craft caravan work, which has now moved more into the policy space, like how do you design curriculum which is inclusive and has art as a focus and stuff like that. So that's been my journey. It's like that.
I think one interesting point that comes out of the conversation is you've been a learner for life. You've never stopped learning, and at different times of your lifetime, you learn new things. So, how important is the skill of learning to learn, or is there even something called learning to learn, or is just a heavy jargon that educationists or the erudite use?
I really think there's something like learning
Okay.
to learn. I really believe that in today's day and age, all you can do is keep learning, because what you should be able to do is have a bucket of experiences from which you draw things and kind of rehash and create kind of a model, right? Essentially, you don't really need to be. Nobody needs to be delivering content to you anymore. There's so much content. What you
Yeah.
need is somebody who allows you to think as to how do you put together all the content you have
Yeah.
and create something magical out of it. Uh,
Yeah.
so I keep telling my students this too. The idea of design, like when we were young, I don't know what we thought. I thought design was only for creative people. What
Mm.
are these creative people? We are told that creative people are people who draw well, sketch well, right?
Yeah.
That's what is creative.
Yeah.
Trust me, Vimal, I have never met a child who has told me she can't draw or he can't draw. Never. It's only the adults who have told me that they cannot do it. Where do we lose that ability to be creative? The system kills it little by little,
Yeah.
and it tells you that you are not creative, right? So design for me is not a creative thing. It's about how you think. It's about how are you able to bring many streams of thought and
Mm.
and address the situation and come up with a solution for it.
Yeah.
So what you do in the kitchen could be design. What you do in a tailor
Mm.
shop could be design. What you do, it's problem solving by bringing a lot of content together to
Yeah.
kind of see how can you fix something, right?
Mm. Mm.
Yes, an artist is a designer in one way, but that doesn't make everybody else not create. That's one
Yeah.
part. And the reason I chose to use craft, that's something that I should talk about, and not art. Why didn't I call
Yeah.
myself the
Yeah. Yeah.
art caravan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, you see, I see art was a very removed thing from our lives. It was
Yeah.
only things you put on the wall. You
Yeah.
saw it in museums, like a Ravi Verma would do a beautiful painting, which I can't even imagine replicating.
Yeah.
Art class in school would be the teacher would put up a picture and tell you replicate that.
Mm.
It gave me no freedom, while craft gave me tons of freedom. I would
Mm.
take wool and make stuff with it. I would tinker with stuff. I would see my grandmother, and every one of these were craftsmen. My grandmother was a craftsman. She would
Mm.
pick up anything and make waste, and that was wasted,
Yeah.
and convert it into something else. That is what we call things like tinkering today, right?
Mm.
She would meddle with things and make stuff. So for me, I believe that children needed that fearless space of exploration, and
Mm.
craft was the answer. Art became a part of it. And if you wanted to be a good artist, you go to an art school, they will teach you the strokes, the
Yeah.
colors, the mediums, the brushes,
Mm.
the palettes, and all of that. But I believed that learning had to be a space of freedom, exploration, not drawing straight lines, but still being able to articulate a story. That was important. To fail,
Yeah.
to have a really different picture, and still say that's a man. It's okay
Yeah.
as long as you believed in it. Yeah.
It's a very interesting story. You know, I might have told this story to you earlier. My first choice in college was visual communication, right? So there
Yes.
was Loyola College in Chennai, which is probably the best visual comms college. And I get an invite for the entrance exam, which by itself was some sort of an achievement for a guy like me. And when I went for the entrance exam, somebody told me that you go there, they'll give you a candle in your hand, and the candle will be lit. You're supposed to draw it with the other hand before the candle melts. You're supposed to draw your hand holding the candle. That was it. I turned back and never went back to the department.
Wow.
Biggest regret in life. Till then, I thought visual communication means I had to be an artist. And my friends
Yeah.
have gotten they're good artists, right? But 40 years down not 40 years, maybe 30 years down the lane or 20 years down the lane, today I'm learning mass communication, right? I'm in fact teaching media education to children. So I kind of agree, totally agree with you when you say that when fear goes into a child's mind that you're not an artist, you're not creative, they stop from exploring their creative side. And
Yeah.
therefore, it kind of leads on to the next question I have in mind. Our conventional education system is not something where you're allowed to be creative, right? They ask you to, go inside a classroom, wear the same uniform, have the same two ponytails, have the same kind of a tiffin box, and say, be creative. And when they go to a job, they'll say, tell me how you're different from someone else. All their life, they've been trained to be the same as everyone else. So when you went to schools, were you invited with arms wide open, were their eyes wide shut, or how was your experience?
I think they were midway with me, thankfully. Though I think I was also fairly, I didn't go to the places where I thought the eyes would be tightly shut. But I must tell you, it was not easy. I'll tell you why. Number one, we have this attitude that, hey, it's great for kids to be creative. It's lovely to say you have a child who draws well and who's experienced, who can articulate through art. But essentially, you need to be good at math and science and the regular curriculum subjects, and also be good at Hindi and Sanskrit and whatever else you're learning. But art is good as a hobby table activity, right? So they would say, we love your curriculum, we love what you're talking about, we love what you want to do, but can we give you like some eighth period of the day or something like that? Or turn it into a hobby club. No, I was not willing to make those changes because I'm like, if you want children to be creative, please give this space the same amount of respect that you would give any of your mainstream subjects. And see, the funny thing is, right, you extract creativity from young people, make them believe progressively in a system that they are not creative. Then you infuse a thinking method called design thinking to replicate what you have removed,
Yeah,
right? While the easier thing to do would essentially be allow children to be creative
yeah.
and experience and have multiple ways of expression rather than remove it completely by trying to kind of standardize things, right?
Mm,
Like, look at what's happening around us today. There's a
mm,
pandemic.
yeah.
We've cancelled 10th board exams and stuff like
Mm,
that. Are you and they're trying to do some weird sort of assessment method. Students are upset about
mm,
it. Teachers are upset about it. The board is upset about it. I have just one question. In 10 whole years of learning in a school, is the education system telling us that they do not know how to assess a kid without an exam?
mm,
Is that the only way you can assess a student? That you've not been able to do a continuous assessment over years to
mm.
say this child has this ability, this capability. How removed are you from your student?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
you're not able to assess a student after 10 years without an exam.
yeah,
So
yeah.
essentially, what are we training our young kids to do? We are training
Mm,
them to write an exam. We are not training them to learn, because
mm.
learning is not about can you be examined about it, because
Yeah,
that's not the only purpose of learning, right?
absolutely.
Learning is happening in many forms. Learning is happening when you're traveling. Learning is happening when you're staying with your grandparents.
Mm,
Learning is happening
mm,
when you have a new baby in the house.
mm.
Some form of learning is happening. How do you situate and tie that loop together is up to you as a parent and a teacher. But
Mm.
are you telling me assessment is the only way to assess? I have a problem with that method. So when I would, and then I would go into schools and they would expect me to assess kids for an art club, for a hobby club. I cannot assess a kid for a hobby. Like, it's not
Correct.
done. I won't do
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think we are still in that middle phase in India. It's going to be a tough one for some time,
Yeah.
but at least the
Hey,
conversations are
yeah.
changing.
Interesting takeaway from what you just said. Separating learning from examination, right? So this has been something we are deliberately trying to implement in Beyond It, right? We tell our
Mm.
children, we tell our learners, we tell our parents that we do two things. We prepare you for exams, we help you learn. You have a choice where you want to focus more. If you want to be a lifelong
Mm.
learner, learn more. Don't worry about academics, we'll take care of it. But if academics is the only thing you're going to focus on, you're missing out a lot of things around you. There are aspects like entrepreneurship, there are aspects like financial literacy, there's aspects like public problem solving, which the conventional education system fails to solve, right?
Yeah.
The whole system was designed to be factory workers. We have a very, very efficient assembly line which produces candidates who are ready for competitive examination. But the minute we
Yeah.
have a problem, the minute we have a pandemic which has struck us, we just don't know what to do with it. And perfect
Yeah.
example that you gave us, we are not able to write exams. What do? The whole system has been built to run like a factory. One
Yeah.
small element, one small cog in the wheel, that's it. The whole system breaks down. So thank you for bringing us
Yes.
to that point. So that takes me
Yeah.
to the next question. I was reading a blog and some articles that you've written. You're talking about something called the conscious learning framework. So what
Yeah.
is conscious learning framework?
Yeah. So when I was writing about make like a I wanted to say that hey, this is my pedagogical idea, right? Like this is where I believe. Uh, uh, I think this is what I bring to the table when I talk about education, right? So I essentially triangulated
Yeah.
three core spaces which were very dear to me and which I believe add value in any form of learning. One is the idea of local knowledge, the idea that our
Yep.
traditional systems of thought have many methods and modes of education and learning that are already inbuilt in them. We somehow forget those spaces and we will go for Reggio, we will go for Montessori, we will go for Bruna. I have no issues with any of those methodologies. I've read all of them. I think some of them talk beautifully about how education should be. Howard Gardner talks about intelligences. It's all great, right? But local traditional crafts and arts have for years used things like practice and what we call practice today, or
Yeah.
experiential learning, or
Yeah.
apprenticeship, or vocation. These are all words that we use in learning these days, which you see alive in these cultures. We see them in
Mm.
traditional spaces of learning, right? So how is that relationship between a teacher and a learner? How is that how is that learning space designed? What from there can we take as a best practice and kind of inculcate in our learning spaces was something that I'm very, very interested in. And how do we use local knowledge to kind of design for a better learning experience? For example, if I went to
Yeah.
a Adivasi community, why should I teach
Mm.
them something that is far removed from their culture when it's visibly there for them as an example? That culture
Mm.
could be the lab where they can learn uh,
Yeah.
how to make that connection with the larger idea, right? Why do I need to take
Yeah.
in something alien? So can
Yeah.
communities look at their own local knowledge systems to build this? It's a form of decentralization, but very essential to do, right?
Yeah.
Second was the idea of an aesthetic education itself. What is an aesthetic education? It's not the idea of just using art and craft. I think any experience has to be beautiful when you experience it. Any experience, right? Be it music. If it's a beautiful song, you listen to it maybe a countless number of times. When you eat a good meal, you feel when it's a well presented meal, you feel very happy when you eat it. Similarly, I think when you deliver an educational experience, it has to have that aesthetic quality. It has to have, and that aesthetic quality does not come from making beautiful charts. It comes from designing an experience beautifully. That means that you allow for very many senses to come and play together and to intermingle with each other, and then allow the learner to make meaning out of that space. You don't go and take the
Yeah.
meaning and say, hey, this is
Yeah.
what I'm intending to tell you. Every learner is able
Yeah.
to take something different out of it. That's very important to me. And I want to understand, I also wanted the futures thinking idea to be very integrally a part of what I do. So futures thinking is you don't think about the future without thinking about the past and the present. Futures is essentially a way of thinking about your future by understanding the trends, the kind of insights and the kind of
Yeah.
observations that are happening around you, and saying, hey, maybe the future would be this, and where is my place in this? How can I design
Yeah.
something which I can then have control over? What is the kind of world I'm going
Yeah.
to live in, and where do I fit into it? I think kids need to understand that, be it
What?
in the
Yeah.
space of climate or be it in the space of
Interesting
any of
question
these
that
other things.
comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
There's a
yeah, that's
question that's come from the
Rajesh.
audience, right? Rajesh is asking a
Yes.
question. Teachers, yeah, teachers being in the position of power, right? So I think you addressed it briefly. You're talking about child being in the
Yeah.
center, right?
Yeah.
Conventional
Yeah.
schools are focused on pedagogy, where the teacher sits in the center of
Yeah.
the class, tells what to do. And I think modern schools or the modern way of learning is shifting towards heutagogy, where this
Yes.
child becomes the center of learning. It's no longer the teacher being the center. How do
Yes.
you see that? How do you see the shift happening today?
I have always designed my learning experiences with the child in the center, and I don't see myself as a teacher there anymore. I'm just facilitating an experience, uh, and I allow for multiple meanings to emerge from what is happening. I'm not doing this test business, right? The whole power, the power comes in. The power comes in when somebody else is allowed to test you.
Yeah,
That's one part of
right.
the power, right? To say that, hey, I'm going to check how good you are at this, and I'm going to put a test at you, right? You're reinforcing the power with this whole examination space. The idea that the teacher is this beacon of all knowledge, which is now being broken completely because
Yeah,
the internet has kind of even wiped that out. Then what is the job
yeah,
of a teacher, right? If you go back, Vimal, if you go back in time, if you look at the Native Americans had their own educational pedagogy, right? It is, I think, called it is a circular model of learning.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the Native Americans had an action learning model. Gandhi has spoken about it, saying in action
Yeah,
we learn. Yeah, we
yeah,
also
yeah,
have apprenticeship and vocation and things like that through which we learn. Right. So many
right.
of these methods are there where the teacher is not the center of the learning space, where there is
Mm,
a reflexive space where learning can emerge, and that
yeah.
essentially need
I
not
think
need
there's,
test.
yep. There's another question which has come in. I think someone wants to know your thoughts on online classes for children. How do you see?
That's
It's probably
somebody
a
who called me
necessary
Appu, so
evil
somebody
today.
who knows me from school or something. Yeah, whoever that is. Hello, I
Okay.
can't see your name, but yeah, thoughts on online classes for a for a class one kid? No, no, no.
I think
I don't
unfortunate
understand.
things.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's
Go ahead, go ahead.
see. Yeah, I so if I can justify this, I pulled my child out of school last year. I said she's not going to sit through any online class because I don't think children of a certain age can be sitting through an online class. If your child is 3.5 years old, your child's attention span is only allowed is supposed to be 7 minutes, not a minute
And
more.
I thought my attention
Yeah.
span was 8 seconds. So a child has more attention
Yes.
span than my attention
Yeah.
span.
Right. So it's 3.5. If your
Yeah,
age
I
is
hear
three and a
you.
half, then just double that. That's all you do. So that 7 minutes is the window you
Yeah,
get to create an experience where you teach them something. But if you're going to put kids in front of online classes for 2 hours and 3 hours, and you're expecting them to learn, it's tragic what you're doing to them. It's but and in essentially, I'll tell you the other issue is that what we've done is we have taken everything that doesn't work in a regular classroom or the physical classroom
mm,
and converted that into an online space, not recognizing that the mediums are
mm,
so different that you do
yeah,
not need lecture on an online
yep,
model, right? So
yep,
we
yep.
really need to go through this flux. I hope this flux brings something out for us which is valuable where we
Yeah.
are today. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Just
I think
conscious
we
of time. I'm
guide
going
this
to
to
wrap up
this.
with just yeah. It's just gonna
Yeah,
wrap up with two questions, right? There are a lot of
yeah.
children learning, logging in. They may not like me calling them children. These are young adults who are part of the on-air
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
What would your takeaways be, or three advice, or four? I don't want to limit it. What are your advices for
Mm.
children who wish to pursue the liberal arts and sciences today at a high school level? What would be advice on what they should do and what they shouldn't do?
If they are pursuing the liberal arts and humanities, okay.
Yeah,
So I'd like to make a few points. Yeah, one is do not study for a job. Learn because you want to learn. Our times, I think we were told, hey, you do engineering, you become a software guy, and you can go abroad and you can settle there, and that was great, right? Like we all wanted to move out of the country and live,
yeah,
love, yeah. But where is the learning, right? Do what you're passionate about, because then the learning becomes so much easier, so much more fun, and everything that you enjoy will come together and become this very nice mix. Yeah, you become a richer and happier human being, which is so important. Uh, the world needs poets, it needs artists, it needs farmers, it needs everybody, right? It doesn't need just engineers or doctors or people like that. Everybody needs to be there. We don't need another Elon Musk. Really, why do we need another Elon Musk? He's doing well where he is. Let him do it, right? You
yeah,
no, I mean, look at the
right.
kind of ads. We're going to teach kids coding today. How do you know that the coding they're learning today is going to be relevant 10 years down the line? What you need to teach them is to think programming, not learn a language, right?
Mhm.
Uh, think programming. What happens when you think like a programmer? That's what you need to teach them. So
Yeah.
learn because you want to learn, and please take the humanities seriously. The humanities are what make life around your world bring nuance. I think today, if we do not have nuance in our society, why people cannot have arguments which are respectful of each other and understand gray areas, it's because we have not learned the humanities. Because
Yeah.
in a humanities course, you will be taught to address history as a space where different worlds can coexist,
Mm.
right? So you don't assess the Tipu Sultan only as a person who killed Hindus, but you also understand in what time and era did he live in, and make your logic from there. So he doesn't. What he did might become a wrong thing, but not that you will go and wipe him away from a history book, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, the other parts that you want to talk about. So please understand that the humanities are the bring nuance to life, and they allow you to situate knowledge in gray areas, and a lot of knowledge is situated in the gray actually. And keep repeating what you like, because it builds mastery, and mastery is a great space to be at, to repeat, because you recognize then that you will be humble, and you will say that you don't know anything completely, and you will always learn. I think that you're constantly open to learning anything new. That's the learner set. No master will ever tell you that I know everything. No,
Yep.
no master will ever say
Yeah.
that. So you're then open to
Yeah.
learning everything.
Interesting things you said, right? First thing you said, don't learn or don't prepare yourself for a job. Learn for the sake of learning. Love what you learn. Learn what you love, right? The second thing you said was the world already has an Elon Musk. The world already has a Zuckerberg. You don't need another guy preparing to bring another Tesla. You need to be your own
Yes.
person. You need to be your own Aparna, right?
Or make your own Tesla,
You
right?
make your own Tesla, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think this is the part where when they say you have to become a Steve Jobs, they highlight the portion that he dropped out, but they don't highlight the part that he actually spent a lot of time learning humanities. He went and
Yes.
learned typography. He went and learned
Yes.
calligraphy, not typography, calligraphy, which makes iPhone what it is today. The sense of
Yes.
aesthetics he brought in was not because of him dropping out of an engineering college or whatever he was
Yeah.
studying. It was because of the humanities and the arts exposure that he had. And I
Yes.
can speak from my domain of marketing. Today, somebody with a strong knowledge of psychology or behavioral understanding, human behavioral patterns, will do better than somebody who understands the pure math, saying that if I have 50 leads, so many conversions will happen. So it's important for us to understand that part. The third part that you mentioned is about practice. Again, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who said that 10,000 hours of practice makes you a perfect person. We start getting into the 10,000 hours only when we get into the college or get into the job. Why not start early? If you want to be an
Yeah.
artist, you want to be somebody, start early.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
practicing your trade and be an expert at it much, much earlier. All right. Aparna, it
Yeah.
was lovely catching up with you.
Thank you,
I
Vimal.
don't want to
Lovely too.
excite the time. This has been a great learning experience
Lovely.
for our learners. We're going to share your video with our followers
Sure.
post this session also. Any
Thank
closing
you.
remarks? What's the future for Craft Caravan after this? Where are you heading to?
Hmm. I really want to kind of see what is the sort of gaps in online learning spaces, and see if those gaps can be fixed with in spaces like policy. I'm more interested in the policy space at this point. I really want to think of spaces uh, where we can kind of break the centralized learning model and look at more community interaction in learning, where smaller groups kind of take charge of what is learning. I'm not even calling it education anymore, if you notice, right? So
Yeah.
where do communities come into play when learning isn't happening? I hope I can write more and all, but none of that's happening. I seem to be spending too much time online. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that's where I am. Yeah.
So all the best to Craft Caravan, all the best to
Thank
Srishti
you.
School and your students and the Youth Future
Yes.
Alliances. And once again, thank you for being with us today and
Thank you,
have a good evening.
Vimal.